So the Giants and Cutting Edge, as Brian mentioned at the beginning, they've been kind of partners with us for 10 years, and I use that word as a true word. It's been a partnership, kind of building it to where we're at today. They've been essential in helping us phase out and our build out, because essentially you're not going to build everything you want in one shebang. And for those of you that don't know, budgets in sports are not the same as players' salaries. So our video production budgets are somewhat limited, but they've been great to kind of get everything started back in 2008, 2009, and really starting with the initial switch over from Premiere to Media Composer, adding additional storage in, eventually introducing asset management in 2012, adding archive in 2013, adding a second asset management in 2014, I think. And they really just put us in a great position today to be able to pull off what we're calling the legacy project, which is we have what ended up being over 18,000 assets on tape and film. That's our history that we've, fortunately people have saved it, and it still exists, which is nice and in really good condition. And so we want to digitize it.
Yeah, we've embarked on this legacy project, as we've been calling it, and the objectives and the goals that we set out, like Brad was saying, they're sitting on tapes and they have a shelf life, so deteriorating over time. So we want to preserve that and start getting that in a safe environment and have a backup plan in the event of disaster, because they were all in 3 or 4 concentrated locations. So. And then, of course, utilizing this so that we can tell our story and have access to not only game footage, but behind-the-scenes stuff from players in the 80s and 70s, and really unlock some of this never-before-seen footage that's sitting there. And then once all of this is processed and we get it back, our goal is to set up a interface for our organization to look at it and access it and be able to see what we have, so that it's out there and people know what we have. While we were planning for this, our physical assets were housed in 3 locations here at the ballpark, and we thought that we had close to 2,000 tapes, but it turns out we have over 5,000 tapes that were located here. And then storage locker on South Van Ness, and that was close to 10,000 tapes. And then in Hayward, at a locker or another storage facility, we thought we had 200 film reels, and it turns out that we had 800 film reels. And I think you guys said it was some incredible World Series footage that we had Iron Mountain do a test of. So we got to see a little taste of it, and it was pretty incredible to see, so can't wait for that. So then the retail warehouse that we have there is where all of the physical assets will go to live for the rest of their days, and we just had a build out of a climate-controlled storage room for those.
So one of the bonuses that has helped the process a little bit was 10 years ago, our archivist took the 10,000 tapes that were in the storage locker at South Van Ness and built out a FileMaker database, at least trying to signify what the tape formats were. Granted, they're non-technical people, so sometimes the descriptions of that were odd, where there's several hundred tapes that were labeled little guys. So trying to understand what's actually there was somewhat of a challenge. You don't really know what you have, but that at least started us on the right foot. And so we were able to kind of understand all the different tape and optical disc formats that we had, ranging from 3/4 inch, VHS, small VHS. Again, what's small VHS? Is that what does that actually mean? 1/4 inch audio tape. And so a lot of this stuff was stored, and we had never actually seen it, so it was just kind of a guessing game, estimated. We went in assuming that there were 10,000 to 12,000 assets, and I think our final count ended up at over 18,000. Iron Mountain can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a little bit of a error correction there. And so our process before was there's a tape on a shelf. You want to create something with it. What do? Well, you grab the tape off the shelf, you digitize a portion of it, or you digitize the whole tape for any project. And we would do that through baseband capture and Media Composer 10 years ago. In 2013 or 14, we added an Avid airspeed so we could do direct recording that would also copy the media straight to our ISIS at the time and check the media into interplay. So that kind of streamlined it a little bit better for us. And then we had some larger projects that we did where we wanted to digitize, 50 plus tapes. So we would use local vendors to outsource, and that process was either moving the original format from, say, a 3/4 inch to a beta so that we could capture the beta on site here, or actually creating digital files kind of later on in our process. Obviously, there's not a lot of pros to those. There's more cons. So we didn't have a way to track what we had already captured, whether it was a piece of a tape or the whole tape. We didn't really track that. The biggest one was 3/4 inch tapes. If you ever try to find a 3/4 inch tape deck that works past one tape, you're a lucky person. We'd throw a tape in, it would play once, and then the tape heads would gunk up. So it was costly to constantly maintain those decks and keep them in operating order. And then same thing, digitizing small batches at a time ended up kind of being way more expensive than we wanted to. So we wanted to figure out a way to streamline that. Our workflow before technically was we would our kind of more artsy cameras behind the scenes and doc footage would go through Telestream, which was added a couple years ago, and get transcoded to Nexus, checked into Interplay, as well as any tape media we captured would go to Nexus. And then we would have our seasonal interns that work here for 6 months out of the year add the metadata to the footage just so we can track it, and they would do that throughout the season. So all of our baseball footage, and then as well as documentary interviews, everything else that we do beyond baseball, and that would go to a T120 that was managed by SGL FlashNet.
So this year, as was mentioned before, is our 60th anniversary of our team being in San Francisco. We were in New York before that, and we moved here in 1958. So towards the end of last year, we thought, why don't we leverage the 60th anniversary to try to get some budget this year to digitize some of these tapes. We've known about these tapes for a while. We use them sporadically. So we're like, maybe we can get the higher-ups to listen to us this time. And, it's an anniversary, like, we need to make historical content this year. So we decided to start small and pitch that we wanted to digitize 1,000 tapes, because at this point we thought we had 10,000. So we're like, a tenth of the tapes is fine. And so we crunched numbers and pitched, could we get some budget for 1,000 tapes, starting small, hoping that we would be able to create some cool stuff out of it and eventually scale up, eventually do this over multiple years and just do a little bit at a time, because anytime we looked at this project, it looked really big, and we knew that no one was going to let us do all of it at once. Well, that's what we thought. So we decided to start small. I don't know if you want to go to the next. But the good news is we had kind of been dropping breadcrumbs for multiple years. In 2012, we did a 3-part documentary series about Will Clark, former Giant, kind of using that process that Brad was talking about, just grabbing a few tapes off the shelf, digitizing it, see what was in there. So that was a really cool piece that we did. And then last year, we were celebrating the 20th anniversary of our 1997 team, which was a team that they were in last place in 96, and they went to first place in the division in 97. So it was a pretty cool story, but we didn't really have any of the footage to tell that story. So we found all the tapes from 1997, and we digitized an entire season of games. And we had one intern log every single play and every single thing that happened. And it was, as an editor, he enjoyed it, and we were able to cut the show in 4 days, because all that metadata was there, and I was just going through looking at all the pieces that he had logged, and we also did interviews, so it was kind of cool because we made an entire show just using archival footage and interviews. So this is from that show. This is the last segment.
Worst in 96 to first in 97. Do you believe in destiny? They do in San Francisco.
To clinch the division after a losing season is huge. You know, I don't think anybody projected us to do that. And, you know, they were kind of like saying, oh, who are these guys and what are they all about? Well, from that moment on, they knew who the Giants were.
So anyway, that was a cool project to work on because we had never seen this footage before, and then all of a sudden it was logged completely. So we found some really cool stuff in there. Another big thing for this year was we were retiring Barry Bonds' number, which is pretty big. We haven't retired a number since 2009. So Barry Bonds in general. Oh, sorry. Cool. So Barry Bonds in general is a really big deal for us. So we were like, we should probably go and find all our Barry Bonds tapes. So last year we pulled off every tape that said Bonds on the label, had it digitized, and just started going through that footage. And found this clip of our broadcasters calling his all-time home run record, home run 756. It's just a random angle inside the broadcast booth. None of us knew this existed. We just found it on a tape. And so we thought it was super cool, sent it over to our social media team. They were like, this is awesome. We're going to post it on the 10th anniversary. And it went on Twitter and Facebook. And we actually had an executive come up to us, and she was like, that was an awesome clip. Where did you guys find that? We're like, in the tapes. So, yeah, funny you should ask. So this is just just an example of the type of gold that we've been finding. Just pulling off random tapes from the shelves, being like, wow, we had no idea this existed. Sometimes these moments don't mean a lot when they're shot. I mean, obviously this one did, but there's some interviews that you find that you're like, wow, this means a lot now, more than it did when it was shot. But if you want to play it, it's pretty cool.
Bassett deals. And Bonds hits one high. Hits it deep. It is out of here. 756. Bonds stands alone. He is on top of the all-time home run list. What a special moment for Barry Bonds. And what a special moment for these fans here in San Francisco. There it is.
So, I mean, everyone's seen that highlight a million times. They've seen what happened on the field. This was just a really unique thing that our fans just ate up. So like I said, we were kind of laying the breadcrumbs. Our executives were already excited by the content that we were making. And then when we did our pitch for the 1,000 tapes, our president CEO, Larry Baer, actually asked, okay, well, you said that there's all these other tapes. How much would it cost if you just did all of them? So we're like, okay, we'll get back to you. So then that started the process of figuring out, well, what would it actually take to do everything?
Yeah, so we obviously challenged to now we're not just doing 1,000. What we think is we're now taking on 12,000 tapes. So what does that actually entail to be able to scale what our current infrastructure is to be able to support kind of a super large volume project in a small timeline? And I will say our original goal was we set out a little over a year ago to do this, and we were foolish to say now that we were trying to get it all digitized by July of this season. Obviously a bit optimistic, and we learned through the process that it's definitely taking a time to understand really what goes into it. And so kind of the four main points are obviously digitizing the tapes. So selecting a vendor. We had tried multiple times and failed trying to do it in-house, and we just don't have the equipment or the capacity or the knowledge to do tape remediation if there's mold or if there's a tape that won't play, if there's audio tracks that are distorted. So really trusting a vendor that be able to take that on. Obviously improving our storage and infrastructure here at the ballpark. I think we estimated, and it could be different now, but it's probably going to be between 1.5 and 2.5 petabytes once 18,000 tapes are digitized. So you need to be able to, obviously, that's not going to be put on spinning disk, that's expensive. So that's why we upgraded our LTO system. And then metadata input, because it doesn't exist if it's not digital, but also if it's digital and doesn't have any metadata, you're not going to be able to find it. So having our intern go through and log the 97 stuff was a great test to kind of see, hey, one person logging an entire season, this many hours of content, this is how long it took him to do that, and trying to figure out, I think we ended up assuming that it's going to be about 25 to 30,000 hours of content that comes back, and it would take one person 13 to 14 years working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year to digitize all that. But if you flip it around, it'll take 14 people 1 year to log it all if you're using manpower. But what's been most exciting in recent years is really, I think, the ability to leverage AI to at least do that first pass of metadata input, whether it's recognizing a player's jersey number, listening to the broadcaster's call and taking the speech out. It's going to get us to that content quicker. And then obviously supplementing that with the human element after the fact, and I think we'll be in a good position. And then finally, as we mentioned before, asset management system that will eventually serve all of our internal customers here in the front office. So our editors are using it obviously in a post-production, but for the simple user, they just want a nice web interface that they can log into and be able to search all of the metadata that we've input, and they know without asking us to look at the footage what we have in our asset library. So we had to scale up the idea. Our first process was sending out a preliminary RFQ to several digitizing vendors that I just Googled, because you don't really know where to start. You type in companies and just send it out saying, hey, we think we have 10,000, 12,000 tapes. What do you think this would cost? And got a bunch of numbers back. And because we had only done small batches, through that process and getting a lot of response back and numbers, realizing that we actually needed to create a more formal RFP to send out, where we could actually set the kind of guidelines that we wanted, video codecs, what we expect as deliverables, and really understand the different offerings of all of the vendors, because everyone has their strengths and what they can do, and they want to take on as much as they can. But really, making the right choice to make sure that we're going to get the best person in for the job. And so that's when we also brought Cutting Edge in to help guide kind of those four cost points and what we needed to do. So they were obviously essential in doing infrastructure upgrades. And we added the Nexus E5 storage, which is 480 terabytes of online storage, and upgraded from Spectra T120 to the Spectra T950, which is bigger than a refrigerator, and a really cool robot. It's my only friend. And I think the part that's overlooked, but the most essential, but really did this is, I'm a media manager. We're a video production company. Project management for the scale of a project is something that we weren't going to be able to take on ourselves. And so Larry Shanowski was really essential in helping guide us through the RFP process. I had never written an RFP before, and we were kind of lost, but being able to go to Cutting Edge and guide us through that process was really essential to get us to this point. And then also they've been continuing work and doing research on AI offerings and stuff that will be available to do once we start to get the content back. So they've also tested numerous workflows and just making sure, hey, before we pull the trigger on all these upgrades, we're absolutely sure that it's going to work with everything that you have going. So we felt confident that, all right, cool, let's get this done in the off season. And we actually did the upgrade over 2 or 3 weeks while the rest of the team was down in spring training, getting content for this season. That was when we were hard at work here at the ballpark, ripping all the old stuff out, putting all the new stuff in. And so through the RFP process, we sent the formal RFP out to 7 vendors, and very happy to say that Iron Mountain was awarded the bid. And I think there's a press release going out this week or next week, so that'll be officially announced, but it's officially announced now. And so obviously our estimated numbers were a bit off. We ended up with over 18,000 assets. and discovered 800 films, both 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter. There was also an additional 200 1-inch videotapes, which I had never seen before in my life. And we didn't even know those existed. And it was, again, the archivist had stored them. They were saved, but she looked at it, saw a reel, and thought it was film. And so you open it up and say, oh, hey, it's 1-inch tape. This is not film. So adding that to kind of the scope of the service. And then they have a facility in Hollywood where they'll be doing the digitizing, but the deliverables that we get back are the digitized media on an LTO7 tape and on a standardized video format and codec that we've selected. Automated QC report, just kind of letting us know, hey, were there any aberrations on the video file? Does it look good? Were there audio dropouts, video dropouts? So we can quickly kind of see the status of the clip as it was captured. A checksum just to make sure we have the entire file received from what they captured to what got sent up here and then transferred onto our storage. And then in addition, kind of taking what was the supplemental database that we had of the storage facility, 10,000 tapes, and really adding a lot more metadata, including photos of all the assets and building kind of a complete database of the physical asset so we can track the barcode, and if we need to go back and find the original master tape, we'll be able to do that based on all of the information that they're putting into it. And so with that, we decided that we needed to, obviously all of the assets are in 3 locations, we needed to centralize everything and stage them so that they could kind of take ownership at that point.
Yeah, so that's kind of when we started to get to work on planning the logistics that went into physically moving 18,000 tapes. So we put together the plan over the course of a couple of weeks, kind of truly took inventory of what we would need, had to get a truck to move everything, and required our production department all hands on deck over the course of a couple days to move from the 3 storage locations, being here at the ballpark, at the storage facility on South Van Ness, and at the storage facility in Hayward. So they moved the tapes and sorted them, laid them out, and then that was to allow Iron Mountain to come in and start doing the process of moving all the tapes down to their facility in Hollywood. Was that?
So one of the cool things, obviously no one had seen the film in probably 20 or 30 years because it had just been sitting in storage, but just being a curious fan that's inside of me, I cracked open one of the 16 millimeter films, and you just start to unspool it because you can look at it, it's film. And it was the 1935 World Series film between the New York Yankees and Brooklyn Dodgers. So Yankees folks, I'll get that to you when we digitize it. But so I kind of the scope of it is, yes, it's a lot of Giants history, but I think what is actually sitting in the films is actually baseball history. So it's beyond just the team. There's additional content there that who knows if the league owns and has captured and digitized. But the better thing to think about is we'll be able to capture that at the qualities that now are available to us. So whether we go with a 2K or a 4K record, we'll have the highest quality version of that film that might exist. And so trying to figure out a way to get that out to the teams that are in the content, and then as well as getting it to the league, so it just gets viewed by somebody. And so this video is just kind of the cataloging process. Obviously, 18,000 barcodes went on 18,000 tapes, and I think was 14 pallets approximately. Yeah, a full truck, and then they made their way down to Hollywood, where the Iron Mountain facility is, where they'll be doing all the digitizing. So they have a secure vault where all the assets will be stored, and then they'll be pulled into their capture facility, and then dumped off to LTO to get sent back. So the process with Iron Mountain is probably going to be about 9 to 10 months. And obviously that's what we expected if we'd started a year ago, we would have been done by July, but now getting the process, the tapes went down to Hollywood maybe 6 weeks ago, approximately. And so they're already doing digitize and capture, and we'll be getting kind of regular weekly or bi-weekly shipments of the content. On our end, we'll get that ingested into our system, QC'd, and then archived back to 2 additional LTO tapes. So we'll essentially have 3 copies of the same media. And so our selections on formats and everything, any videotape, anything that's standard def or HD, standard def will be up converted to 1080, and HD will stay HD, and it'll be a ProRes HQ QuickTime movie file that comes back. Film, we still haven't decided yet, and we'll make that decision, but the offerings there are 2K and 4K. And with that, we'll get DPX image sequences, which will kind of be our master archive and the highest quality image. And then they're also going to create ProRes HQ matching whatever the source resolution is, which is just a little easier to get into our workflow and work with right away. But obviously having the fallback of the DPX image sequence, if you do find that one amazing World Series film, you have the highest quality version possible. And then audio captures, we have a lot of cassette tapes. There were some 8 tracks that were in the library, and we're not really sure what's on that, but old radio music maybe. Yeah. So the film will be 24 frames. When it gets converted to video, it'll be 23.976 frames. Correct. So when we do export of our final, that's when we will create progressive video on our end, but we'll edit interlaced all the way up until the end before we flip it. And so just kind of a look of now that the workflow that we have set up. So all of our content will come in from Iron Mountain on LTO tapes. We get that tape loaded into our Spectre T950 tape library, get it into the Eon browser, and Black Pearl then manages that tape, so it gets added into a second, a third bucket of information there, where it can manage that, and then that ProRes QuickTime movie gets pushed to a temporary Nexus workspace where there's a watch folder. From there, our Telestream Vantage will transcode it to DNX HD, HQX, or 220 for those of you that still know the old bit rates. And it will, in addition, make a proxy file at that time. So that'll go to a different workspace on Nexus. From there, it will get managed by Black Pearl again, back to the T950 and written to 2 copies where we can send a disaster recovery off-site, probably back to Iron Mountain for secure storage. But it could go anywhere. So we at least have 2 copies of kind of the asset management managed data. Just feeling, that hadn't been something that we had in place before. So obviously, we want to make sure that all of this data is secure. We're making the investment to digitize it. You want to make sure that it's safe. And then additionally, interns and AI will be sitting on top of our asset management to be able to put that metadata in the same way we're doing now, but obviously with AI being a big piece.
So, what are we going to do when we finally get all of this back, and what does it mean? So I think what's really exciting is the distribution channels and platforms in which content can be consumed by our fans and just by the rapidly growing ways that that's taking place. It will allow us to create content that can be put out and really go back, and we can develop new content series, similar to the 97 or the Will Clark shows. I mean, that we are expecting and hope to find a lot of content on these tapes that we can turn into types of shows like that. We've talked, and goals could be to even create a digital museum space where a lot of this content can be viewed in an interactive space. And then, Alyssa, you want to talk about how you use it?
I'd edit it, yeah. No, so another thing that's cool about this stuff is that history is always relevant, regardless of kind of what's going on with the team. Fans love nostalgia, especially baseball. Baseball is such a traditional sports rooted in all this history. So sometimes you get this feeling of like, well, who cares about this stuff? Like, it already happened. But the thing is, like, it really resonates with people. So we do believe that there's a lot of content opportunities. Even today, in 2018, people still love to see this stuff, especially when it hasn't been seen before. It helps that we are fans, because it just makes us excited to find out what's in it. But yeah, just the future, it's already been talked about multiple times, but AI, we want to see how that can help with this process in the future. It's kind of a unknown in a lot of ways, but it would save us from hiring 14 interns a year. And kind of, with machine learning, it helps to have a lot of content, a lot of data feeding it. So, like, what better project to have going on to teach AI? And hopefully in the future we'll have some crazy machine that can recognize players and facial recognition, speech to text. Like, it would be awesome. And then the storefront, which was sort of mentioned earlier, but one of our dreams is to let this be seen by others, not just us. We don't necessarily want 10 years down the road for people to be like, do you have anything on, Willie Mays? We want it to be kind of open for at least people in our organization to be able to log in and look at things online or on some sort of browser interface where they can check out what we do have, or even in a museum context where fans can look at it. So, yeah, Brett.
Last little mention, I just wanted to shout out our fearless leader, Paul Hodges, who's the VP of SFG Productions. He couldn't be here today because he welcomed his second child about 6 weeks ago. So he's out on his paternity leave, enjoying family for a while. So, but he was essential in kind of helping guide us, empower us to take this project on, get the executive buy-in, and it's Richard mentioned collaboration and team. It's not one person taking everything on. There's a dozen of us that are working here, every single day of the year to figure out how we can take on big projects like this and entertain fans. That's ultimately the goal, is to put a good experience out for the fan, whether they're inside the ballpark or outside the ballpark. So special thanks to Paul, who couldn't be here, but we're definitely excited to be embarking on this project, and thank you all for listening to us talk about it for a while.